Hey Will, let's talk about the Radeon RX 9060 XT 16GB version we have right in front of us.
I think you've said too much already. All I really care about is it good?
Yes, it is. TLDR, it is essentially an RX 7700 XT, but cheaper.
And better at ray tracing.
So if you are looking to buy a around $400 GPU, we have done some testing and we're gonna go through it real quick, starting off with what is this GPU that we have right in front of us? Which model is this, Will?
This is the XFX Swift RX 9060 XT 16GB edition.
Okay, nice. So generally, TLDR on the actual specs of what this is. This is an RDNA 4 based GPU, and with RDNA 4 brings...
Well, we get dedicated hardware for ray tracing, better upscaling, better frame gen. Instead of having to use GPU rendering cores to do that stuff, they have dedicated hardware for it on the device now.
Perfect. On top of that, this is gonna slot in lower on the stack than what we already have out, which right above it is the RX 9070 non-XT, which I did test. We have one of them right here. And the 9060 XT comes in two variants, the 8GB version and the 16GB version. Both are launching today, but we only have the 16GB version in front of us right now, so that is all we tested.
Yeah, and our understanding is the 16GB version is available in Western countries. The 8GB version is a little bit more worldwide for different markets.
But this GPU should be exactly the same except for memory capacity.
Yeah, it's $50 more for the 16GB version. If you have the option, I'm gonna say get the 16GB version, but if you don't, maybe don't buy an 8GB card.
Yeah, and we do not have the actual price of this model or the street prices because it is not launched yet, but if I were to guess, this is probably gonna come in around $400.
It's impossible to know the prices given the current climate. Like the cards that launched $100 more than this are now selling for like $700, $800, $900 on street. So who knows? Let's talk about perf.
Performance, that is the big thing you're wondering. We're gonna break this out into 3 different categories, and we have 6 other GPUs that we're testing against, 3 AMD GPUs to show previous generation GPUs as well as the 9070 non-XT, 2 NVIDIA GPUs, and 1 Intel GPU. We will say that for the NVIDIA GPUs, we actually do not have a 5060 on hand yet. It has been upheld in a shipping, unfortunately, so we can't test it against that, but I do have a 4060 and a 5060 Ti 8GB version, so we'll try to aim for where the 5060 is gonna be.
Yeah. So our first category is productivity, which is AI generation stuff, both text and images, as well as video editing.
Yep, and TLDR, the performance is right there with previous generation 7700 XT. So coming in at a 7700 XT with some slight variation, but a lower price.
And that's a card that's about $150 more launch, currently streaming for about $550, the 7700 XTs.
Exactly.
So one thing I noticed about these charts, Adam, is that one card punches well above its weight.
And for specifically the AI generation stuff, the B580 does particularly well in this benchmark suite. So if you're looking to do AI specifically, that seems to be the one that you probably want to have your eyeball on.
And the B580 launched at $250 for the limited edition, which is what we tested. The comparable cards that are available now are about $300, $325. Yep.
But you're not here for productivity, you're here for gaming. Okay, well, we have a host of benchmarks that we ran all these GPUs through, and we're gonna start off with rasterization performance, which, what is raster?
Well, in this case, rasterization basically means we're using traditional lighting models. There's no ray tracing in these benchmarks.
And there is a little bit of upscaling, which you can see on the slides as they pull through. But TLDR, essentially, we're right there with the 7700 XT from the previous generation.
And the thing that's worth noting about these benchmarks is they're going to give you performance. If you're playing a lot of esports type titles, games that you don't use advanced video features like ray tracing and things like that, you're going to get, this is the kind of performance you should expect to get from that, as evidenced by like Rainbow Six Siege scores here.
And it is doing much better than the RTX 4060 in all of this tests, and depending on the game, actually lines up right there with the more expensive 5060 Ti 8GB version. Now, once again, that is 8GB. We didn't run into any VRAM limits with our R suite specifically that we tested here, but you would know that, hey, This one has 16 gigs. The 5060 Ti 8 gig version only has 8. So you could potentially run into the VRAM issues in the future.
So how does this compare gen over gen, Adam?
So the video card that it is replacing is supposed to be the RX 7600 XT, and this thing trounces on it. It's great. I like it. Trounces is not a word. I don't know what I said.
And that means
Trounce.
It's real good compared to
trounce is what I meant.
It prances on it or it trounced it. We're not sure which one.
But what about RT? Because I keep hearing that RT is the future, Will.
Well, so ray tracing is a lot more mathematically intensive. You often add features like dynamic lighting. There's a varying range of ray tracing features too, right? You can use it to add shadows or reflections. You can also use it to compute all of the light in the game, and that is real spendy. How do the games stack up with these cards?
Yeah, so the tests that we put it through have a variation of light ray tracing implementation all the way up to really heavy path tracing stuff. And while RDNA 4 is much better than the previous gen RDNA 3, NVIDIA still has an inherent advantage with ray tracing regardless of what you're looking at.
In a lot of ways, this is AMD's first real go with ray tracing. Previously, they used shader engines to do the ray tracing math, and it was a really limited approach. This is a much better go. I'm excited about how this turned out, even though these numbers aren't beating the NVIDIA cards. But I think there's definitely room to improve here.
I mean, and I will say almost all these GPUs, except for the more costly 9070, wasn't turning in amazing, full path trace performance anyway. So it's not like NVIDIA has an inherent advantage that will get you up to amazing performance. At this price point, pure path tracing is just kind of off the table. You're looking at more light implementations.
For the most part, these bars may be bigger, but none of these performances are better.
Yeah. And even if you do light ray tracing, which I think this GPU can do, one thing that you will be much happier about than the 5060 Ti 8 gig version is that you have 16 gigs of VRAM to play with, because you're probably going to need more VRAM capacity for turning on RT features, and especially if you want to use something like upscaling and frame gen.
Yeah. So Adam, who's this card for?
I mean, obviously this is for somebody who is doing light gaming, I think. Esports titles, 1080p is like a sweet spot for this. I think you can jump up to 1440p, but it depends on whether you're willing to do a little bit of upscaling or things like that. Either way, I would call this, for this price range, probably your best option out there. Now, once again, we haven't tested the RTX 5060 yet, but depending on how it scales here with the other GPUs, I would much rather get this GPU.
We know the 5060 isn't going to be better than the 5060 Ti.
Yes.
I think we can safely say that. And the other thing we don't know is what the pricing's going to end up at. If these cards come out of the box at 2x the MSRP, that's probably not a great price. I would not spend that much money on one of these
Which
cards.
Unfortunately, the 9070 launch is still very inflated in terms of pricing. Yeah. So depending on what you're coming from, I mean, if you're coming from an old 10 series or an RX 580, then like maybe you're willing to spend that kind of money. But at the most part, I'm hoping that GPUs at this price range actually don't get too inflated as opposed to these other options. I mean, we have seen 5060s on shelves at MSRP. We have seen the B580, even though it has risen a little bit since launch, it still is not super inflated compared to some of these other GPUs. So hopefully at this price bracket, pricing is gonna be okay. Also availability. So AMD says that they are gonna really, hope to have a lot of stock at launch. They've claimed that the 9070 launch is 10 times, they've sold through 10 times more inventory than previous launches, any previous launch ever. So hopefully that also bodes well for the 9060 XT. But as time of recording right now, we're crossing our fingers, because at least in terms of performance, this looks to be awesome.
Yeah, it looks like a great deal for the price.
Last notes are about this specific XFX model, which it does have one 8-pin power, which is nice. It is a larger design. It is not as large as the triple fan of the 9070, but depending on other dual fan designs, I think it is a little bit larger, but it was quiet. It was nice and
it has the blow-through cooler.
It has the blow-through cooler. The only nitpick I would have, which I also had on these other XFX models, is that if you put your ear right next to it, you get this weird fan turbulence. Like it's not
like a womp 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 womp.
Yeah, it's not gonna permeate through a case.
Yeah.
But like I have it on an open air test bench sitting right next to me as I'm doing testing, and like every once in a while it's just like. Like you hear a little bit of odd turbulence that I'm not hearing with other GPUs.
So it has a little bit of a switch on top. Do you know what that one's for?
So that is a dual BIOS switch, which is a good feature, especially at this price point. So good on XFX for implementing one of that. It does only have 3 video ports, so 2 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI. So you're not going to run 4 monitors, I guess. But
man.
I mean, at this price range, you probably not more than 2 monitors anyway. So I don't think it's a big deal, but I bet some people would be upset.
So this is pretty much the entire stack of video cards from Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, with that one notable exception.
Well, the 5060. So we do have a 5060 coming from Asus. It should be here, and we will be doing some coverage head-to-head versus the 9060 XT because I am very curious to see. But we're not going to do just the benchmark suite. We also are going to do some microstutter videos because I think that's where you're really going to see some differences. So really curious to see that test.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things about this review in particular is that the raster benchmark charts all have the same kind of shape, right? The same cards are consistently leading, the same cards are consistently behind, and usually to the same percentages. We're looking for new ways to differentiate these cards because they are running very similarly, and running more benchmarks might not necessarily be better if they're just showing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
Exactly. So the actual last question mark out there, is there a higher end version of Battlemage waiting in the wings? We don't know. Maybe that'll come out.
Where's Celestial
before the end
Adam?
of the year. Well, that's probably still a ways off, but there's been rumors of a B770, so maybe that could be something in the $400 price range that would pique your interest, but we will have to see. Either way, be sure to subscribe here on PCWorld for all of that testing and more. And while you're at it, why don't you watch this next GPU video? This one's a good one.